In putting the wing together, there's an awful lot of rib preparation, and so I wanted to show you the steps that I go through for rib preparation. I've got one of the example ribs here. One of the other videos shows you, what the ribs start to look like as you build up the wing skeleton. I've got a certain way of doing this, and I'm going to show it to you. It's pretty easy and pretty quick. It does get monotonous by the time you get to the 30th rib, but that's okay. That's part of building. So the steps that the rib has to be ready to install for fitting are that the edges need to be deburred and smooth. The flanges need to be deburred and smooth. The little notches that you see, like here and up here, those little holes and cutouts have to be deburred. The edges have to be flattened so they're at 90 degrees, which they are not when it gets shipped to you. They all kind of end up sprung out a little bit, so we have to make everything 90 degrees. Then we have to flute the edge so that all of the holes are in a straight line, because you'll see that they are not. They are definitely curved off to one side, and when you flatten it, that curve gets worse. So let me show you how that works. It's a little noisy running the grinder, but I think you'll get the idea. I wanted to talk to you about the wheels that I have in my grinder. You'll see two wheels. This is for deburring, and this is for polishing and removing materials. So these are both special wheels. They're made by 3M. They're used specifically for aluminum and soft metals. The reason that a regular grinding wheel should not be used with aluminum is because a regular grinding wheel, like you would use for steel, will cause the aluminum to melt. The molten aluminum will fill in the holes in the wheel, and you'll end up with a wheel that's loaded up with aluminum, and it really doesn't work very well. And it also will get very hot. So a regular grinding wheel should not be used with aluminum, because when it gets hot, it can explode. And if you've ever been in a shop with an exploding grinding wheel moving at 3,000 or 4,000 RPM, that's an exciting moment, and you would like to not have that moment. It's too exciting. So to avoid all excitement, we have these special wheels for aluminum, 3M grinding wheels. This is the heavy duty one. This is the light duty one. If you want to take a lot of material fast, you use this one. If you just want to clean up the edges and deburr it, this wheel is awesome. When I built my 14, I only bought this wheel. If you only are going to have one wheel, you want the heavier wheel that takes up more material. The problem though is that when you're deburring, you have to be super light. You have to give it a super light touch, because it'll take an awful lot of aluminum really fast, especially on a thin sheet. On a big bar, this is your go-to wheel, but on thin sheets, you really don't want to use it. You want to use this one. So what you're going to see when I prep the ribs is you're going to see me use the small, the light duty wheel. I have no reason to take material. I really just want to deburr and clean up the edges. And the goal with deburring of the rib is to be able to run your finger along the edge and not get a cut, not feel any sort of ridges or anything like that. You want to be able to just go along very nicely and just work yourself right on down. You can't see it, but I can feel it. I could run my thumb right up and down this edge and it won't cut me. Before I had done this, if I'd have run my hand real hard on there, I would have gotten a cut in my hand. So that edge is all taken care of. The next step is to clean up these flanges, and what I like to do for that is I have a smaller wheel in a die grinder It's probably 2 inches across. It's got a little groove in it because of using it for this purpose. When you start out, it doesn't have the grooves. You have to be a little more careful. And I'm going to use this to clean up the flanges, or clean up these right here. So here we go. Little noisy, bear with me. The smallest one is actually the most interesting because when you do the big one, the wheel goes around, no problem, it doesn't bog down at all. But when you do the small one, there's actually more surface area of the wheel in contact with the round. And so it ends up slowing down quite a bit more when you do the small one than the other one. So the smaller one's actually a little trickier than the big one. You have to go a little bit slower, a little bit lighter pressure. A little bit slower, a little bit lighter pressure, but you get the job done. These are now very smooth. No nicks, burrs, or cuts at all. The next step in the process is to get some sandpaper into the corners and into these edges where the wheels cannot get. I buy this right here to do this job. It's called Klingspor cloth backed. It's called Klingspor cloth backed sandpaper. This stuff is awesome because you can rub it on anything you want and it doesn't tear. If you've ever used sandpaper very much, you know that if you rub it across a hard corner, or if you twist or roll it or do anything with it, it wants to tear. But this cloth-backed sandpaper is really awesome. There you can see the information if you want to buy some of this. It's about 1 inch thick. It comes 50 yards in a roll. Probably cost me $20. I've got a 5 airplane supply in this box, and I really recommend it. So take some of this cloth-backed sandpaper and roll it up a little bit, you know, turn into a little thing that size. And what you'll do is go to every corner and just sort of pull it through. If you pull it through, making sure you pulled it across every part of the surface, and then I kind of get up on top of it like this, that's really all it ought to take to get that corner deburred. Pretty easy. So I'm just going to go around, I'm going to catch every one of those the same way. Make sure I don't have any rough edges. Nothing that's going to want to crack later on. Now, some people would argue that this is something that will kind of change the corrosion property of this metal. These pieces are made with all-clad. The top layer is pure aluminum, so that it will form an aluminum oxide layer and not corrode. I'm planning on priming everything, so if I'm a little over-aggressive with getting this step done to get a smooth edge, I really don't care because I'm coming back and top coating everything anyway. But honestly, a little bit of deburring I don't think takes off enough of the aluminum, of that all-clad aluminum layer to make it worth arguing. I think getting the burrs off is an important step to not have cracks in your finished airframe as you're flying in years to come. Of course, that's probably an arguable point, but some form of deburring must be done on all pieces. But it doesn't have to be super aggressive. You'll notice that I'm not going hog wild here. I'm not trying to get it down to a micro polished smooth edge, and I'm not worrying too much about trying to make it perfect in terms of every last little bit of surface roughness. What I'm trying to do is make sure that there's no large cracks or rough surfaces that are going to create stress risers for the future. All right, so now that I've got all of this edge prep is done, the next thing I need to do is make the flange 90 degrees to the web. Right now it's probably 85 degrees. And so I built a contraption that's similar to what's seen on the internet and in a lot of places, and it's in the 27 Years in Aviator with pictures and explanations. What Vans shows in their example is a 2-inch wood block cut down to make a handle and a connection. I don't know what you would call this piece down here. This is the base plate, obviously. And then there's a 2x2 about 4 inches or 5 inches long. And then the rest of the 2x2 I cut off. And I put it together with AN3 hardware that I had laying around and some mending straps. And so one of the challenges I had in doing this was, where do I find this metal bar? You know, do I have to take some bar and poke holes in it, or you know, where do I find a piece like that? And the answer was at Home Depot or Lowe's in the bins that they have, or any good Ace Hardware probably has these, and they're called mending plates. They're ready-made. They come in various lengths, and so I just bought one in a convenient, I think it's a 5-inch length. There's a hole every half an inch. You pick the holes you want to use, and these mending plates are a nice little steel way of putting this together. On the Vans example that a lot of people have, they put a hinge in, and I tried that at first, but I found that in moving this like so to form my edge, that the hinge kind of worked its way out and wouldn't stay in, whereas bolts through this poplar have been super sturdy. The poplar is such a hard wood that the bolts don't fret, and the hole hasn't really opened up over time as I've worked apart. And so the other thing about this is that it has an 11-degree back cut, and I find that the reason for that is when you put the piece in, and you don't have to really crank down on it, you just sort of gently push it in like that. An 11-degree bend in the back cut overbends it, so when it springs back, it's pretty much close to vertical. And so you can see that with just that little effort like that, I've got that first part of the edge perfectly 90 degrees, and it took no effort at all. If I didn't have this device, I'd have to sit here with, with a tool and just sort of work it, eyeball it, get a 90-degree angle on here, and do all this work. But with this, you'll see that I can do this whole edge pretty quickly. I just sort of work my way down, about a half an inch at a time. Doesn't need to be precise. I didn't mark it out to make sure I knew what half an inch was. I'm just kind of eyeballing it as I go. And I'm just going to work my way all the way down the edge. It's a little tight. You can make yours a little looser. Now that I've gone all the way to the edge, I'll see that this is a very nice 90-degree profile, and my flange is straight up and down with relation to the web. And you want that because when you come in and rivet that skin on, you want everything to be nice and flat. So I'm just going to finish up around. You got to be careful because there's some places on the plane where the flanges at the spars and things are not 90 degrees, and you wouldn't want to force a piece to 90 that's not supposed to be. Okay, so the last step in all this is going to be the fluting. And when I first did this, I really didn't get what the fluting was all about, but let me show you what it's all about. If you look up the length of this rib, and I don't know if you can see it or not, but the holes kind of do an arc. They go from here around over to here. And if you start at the beginning on this end is probably 2 inches that way, curved around. It's not straight. And so I would like it to be very straight. One of the ways of seeing if it's straight is to get a ruler, and you kind of line a ruler up, and if all the holes are in a line, then it's good. I like to do something a little bit different. I've taken some twine. And you can use any kind of twine. You can use fishing line. You can use whatever's handy. And let me find my Cleco pliers. They're over here. And I actually like, and I've never seen anybody else do this, although I've never had an original thought, so I have to think somebody else has already done this. But what I like to do is Cleco the string from the hole on one end all the way down to the hole on the other end. And what I think this does for me is kind of shows me the way on the curvature. I'm gonna put my glasses on so I can see a little better. And I'm going to show you that it's really obvious now with the string there that the holes are not in a straight line relative to the two endpoints. I mean, even if my string isn't exactly in the right spot, I mean, the most casual observer can see this is not right. So the way we flute is with fluting pliers. And what will happen is the top part will go down and push a little linear dimple down in the flange. And what happens when you do that, when I do that here, this part out here stays the same length, but this part gets shorter, and it causes the piece to kind of do this, kind of bend in this way, which should line up all the holes. So I've done, I don't know, maybe 20 of these in the last couple of days, so I kind of already know how much of this I need to do. So I'm just going to sort of give it a gentle little squeeze. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that these pliers that are available in aircraft spruce, you know, they're really just vise grips with little pieces of rod welded on the end, and it's all polished up and painted. You want to tighten this down in a way where when you do the fluting on the piece, it doesn't snap and lock. Because when it snaps and locks, it kind of overdoes things. You end up with too much of a flute. You want to make it a little hard, and you don't want it over snapping. So kind of set yourself up like that. I come in and I just kind of give it a sort of a squeeze at each one. I don't know how to tell you how much is enough. It's a feel thing. I can tell you that it's not enough to snap the pliers, and I can feel them starting to get close to snapping, so I'm going to tighten up a little bit. I just want to give a good little squeeze everywhere along here. So I've done my first line of dimpling. You can already tell that the string is very much closer to where the holes are all the way along the length. I kind of pull on my string and tighten it up a little bit. Use my thumbs and kind of set things to the top of the holes and see where I'm at. Maybe snap it once or twice just to make sure, you know, friction isn't getting in my way of seeing the real thing. And there's some, I still need a little more. I need a little bit more right here. So I'm just going to take my tool and give a little more. It's easier to closely approximate, or let me say it a different way. It's easier to kind of get there in small steps than it is to do big steps and have to fix it. It's hard to unflute this. You can unflute it. You just have to turn the tool upside down and be super careful. What I found when I overdo it is that I have to way undo it and then little redo it, you know, if that makes sense. So now I've made some adjustments. I'm going to check with my string, and I think I feel pretty good about that. So there you can see the string is pretty much running along the holes evenly. It's not running down the middle, it's running across the top more or less, but it's pretty much dead on. I'm going to go with it. If I took a long ruler, I'd have to look at it in little sections. I think I'd find it's really good. So now we just repeat on the other side. The other thing to watch out for is that both sides are not created the same. You'll find that in these pieces all throughout the airplane, there's usually more curve on one side of a flange than there is on the other. The piece is not symmetrical. And so, in general, the more curve, the more fluting is needed. So you can take that into account as you're doing this. What I usually do is just make one light pass with a little bit of flute everywhere. I usually don't, I don't really try to make the string line up till I've done one full pass of little gentle flutes. And one full pass of little gentle flutes, and then I kind of check and see where I'm at, and I go, all right, well, I got plenty more to do. And then I come back and sort of do it again in the areas where it looks like it needs it. So I don't try to get it all done at one time. I just do a little bit as I go. And usually end up pretty happy at the end that I've gotten there. And that's it. This piece has been edge prepped, straightened, and fluted. Now the last part of this is it should lay very flat on the table. If I've done this right, there's no twist in it. It lays flat. because having those curved edges and not at 90 degrees and everything else, it usually makes it bowed up. It'll rock back and forth. If you took a new one out, it would rock around. This is laying nice and flat on the table. Another excellent sign that I've prepared it correctly. All right, thanks a lot, and we'll get this onto the spar, and we'll have some more videos down the road.